Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. My name is JoJo Sweat, and I am the Organizing Director for Common Defense. I'm also a United States Marine Corps veteran and an Iraq War veteran. Standing with me today are some of our nation's finest citizens, folks who wrote a blank check payable to the United States of America for an amount up to and including their life. Unfortunately, many of us who have served have still been marginalized and disenfranchised from the very political systems that were designed to serve and protect us all, and we are demanding better. Courage for America is a bipartisan, diverse council of proud Americans speaking out against an extremist agenda that puts money and power over our rights and freedoms and continues to put our country at great risk against our adversaries. Veterans from across the nation stand together with Courage for America's Council, and we will continue to rebuke the extreme views and policy positions of the MAGA extremism that continues to grow in the new House majority. I'm pleased to introduce our first speaker, Representative Jason Crow of Colorado, a fellow military brother, former Army Ranger, and Bronze Star recipient who served 3 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. In keeping with his commitment to his oath of office and his oath of enlistment, Representative Crow, trapped in the House gallery during the insurrection, called on his combat experience as members figured out how to escape. In keeping with his military training, he was the last member to leave the chamber after everyone else was safe, in stark contrast to the Holly who ran away as fast as he could. Welcome, Rep. Jason Crow.
Thank you, JoJo. Thank you, Common Defense. Thank you, Courage for America, for standing up and letting your voices be heard. And special thank you to the veterans, my brothers and sisters, standing behind me for continuing to serve. Because what they know, and what we all know, is that the oath does not expire. When you raise your right hand and you take that oath to give everything to your country, it is a lifetime commitment. A lifetime commitment in uniform, but continuing to fight for and preserve our democracy. And never has that been more important than the era that we live in right now. 2 years ago, we saw an unprecedented assault on our democracy. As the grounds behind me and the Capitol behind me came under assault, stirred up by Donald Trump and his minions, who refused to accept the will of the American people, who refused to accept our traditions of democracy, and instead succumbed to power and to greed and stirred up a mob that brutally beat police officers, security officers, and others, even killing one and traumatizing so many others. You know, that day is a day I often think about. How did we get to that point? As I sat there in the gallery with my fellow members, and as that mob was beating down the door, and we were erecting barricades to keep them out, I thought about how you can have veterans on both sides of that door. You have one set of veterans who succumbed to the big lie, who thought wrongfully that they were the patriots that day. Then you had veterans on the other side of the door, police officers, members of Congress who were fighting for our democracy. How did we get there? When years ago We both sat on the plains of bases and posts around the country and raised our right hand and took the same oath in good faith and served together in good faith. How did we get to that moment? And while Donald Trump bears the majority of the responsibility, it wasn't him alone that led us there. It's years of division and disinformation and misinformation and lies, and a media apparatus that promoted and amplified those lies that led us to that moment. So then it brings us to our responsibility. Where do we go? What we do is we build and we deliver. I oftentimes get people asking me, why don't we fight like they fight? Why don't we fight fire with fire? Well, my friends, the answer is simple. Because we're not like them. We are doing different things. We are building, we are protecting, we are delivering. If last November showed us anything, it's that building and moving forward with a positive vision will take us out of this. It's what the American people want, it's what they deserve, it's what they elected us to do, and it's what we will all do. And me and my fellow veterans, my brothers and sisters, will not relent. We will not stop. We will build. We will deliver. We have a positive vision for America. We've done it before. We served together before. We will continue to do it. We will not stop. My friends, our country deserves nothing less. Our brothers and sisters who made the ultimate sacrifice deserve nothing less. We will spend the rest of our lives pursuing this project. Thank you all. God bless the United States of America.
A quote that I heard after January 6th that comforted me came from Representative Chrissy Houlihan of Pennsylvania. She said, "Our country's resolve is being tested. I believe we will pass this test together and we will be made stronger." And that's the kind of leadership we deserve. Representative Houlihan is an Air Force veteran, an engineer, a serial entrepreneur, an educator, and nonprofit leader. She represents Pennsylvania's 6th Congressional District, which encompasses Chester County and Southern Berks County. She serves on the House Armed Services Committee, the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and the House Small Business Committee. Please welcome Representative Chrissy Houlihan.
Good morning, everyone, and it's very hard to follow Jason, as you can probably appreciate the position that he had on January 6th, just about 2 years ago today. But I will say good morning once again, because today, indeed, it is a good morning. It's a good morning to be gathered here together with our fellow patriots, those who stand behind me and those who stand in front of me and those who are at home, hopefully listening. Patriots who care deeply about our national security, who care deeply about our democracy, who care deeply about protecting the U.S. Constitution against all enemies, both foreign and domestic, and who care deeply about protecting our beloved future and our beloved nation. A nation that we have, most of us, proudly served in uniform. And in fact, I'll pause just a minute to say just about a mile from here lives my parents. My dad served more than 20 years, my grandfather more than 30, my brother in the Army, my dad and grandfather in the Navy. I have active duty cousins right now who are serving overseas, and one who just separated as a Navy SEAL. This is personal to me, what the service means to me. But we are here today gathered to remember that nearly 2 years ago now today, it was not a good morning here at the citadel of our democracy that stands behind me. Our United States Capitol Police officers, like Michael Fanone, who I had the opportunity to meet here today, were on the front lines, enduring physical violence to protect this sacred place, including my colleagues and including me. And for that, I am very, very thankful. While the individuals who descended upon and disrespected these storied halls represent a very small fringe faction of the population, it is no secret that they were inspired by some of the most senior officials in our government who failed to accept the results of the 2020 election. And that's why we are standing here today. As Mr. Crow mentioned, it's because of a lie. It's really that simple. As elected officials, we are entrusted constantly, continuously to tell the truth to the American people. Not a manipulated, self-serving version of the truth, but rather, as an engineer I say, a facts-based truth. And that truth is that President Biden was and still is our duly elected president. And so to my classmates of 2018 and fellow veterans, Jason and Mikey, it's an honor to stand by you today here. And we and others with a military and national security background were elected in response to a very deep and powerful undercurrent of the electorate that was concerned at that time about the violent political rhetoric coming from the former administration. Rhetoric that far too many elected officials refused and still refuse to this day to condemn. To another representative and fellow representative from the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Chris DeLuzio, it's an honor to have you join us, and it's an honor to get to know you and together to show that our birthplace of the democracy, Pennsylvania, will not stand for threats to our democratic institutions. And lastly, to our fellow veterans who are gathered here today, thank you so much for standing by your oath, as Jason mentioned, a permanent oath that you took to support and to defend this Constitution in the United States. And so we all are brought together, thankfully, by Courage for America and Common Defense. We stand united with one message. We condemn political violence of all forms, and we owe it to the American people and our brave law enforcement officers to proudly say that over and over and over again. So I will conclude, similarly to Jason, with a deep gratitude and deep appreciation. God bless America, and thank you.
All right. A United States Naval Academy grad, Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill spent almost 10 years on active duty in the United States Navy. She flew missions throughout Europe and the Middle East as a Sea King helicopter pilot, worked on the battle watch floor in the European theater during the Iraq invasion, and served as flag aide to the Deputy Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Atlantic Fleet. She voted for H.R. 3233, authorizing the Bipartisan National Commission to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol. The final version of the commission included many of the elements that were co-authored by her and Rep. Jackie Speer, notably to include ensuring the commission had an equal number of members appointed by both parties, ensuring the committee had the power of subpoena, and that the commission had the authority to investigate related domestic terrorist activities. We are especially proud of her steadfast devotion to ensuring democracy. Welcome, Congresswoman Sherrill.
Wow. It's hard to believe the time it's been since January 6th took place and how far we've come. You know, as we stand here in the shadow of our nation's capital, it strikes me of what an iconic building this is and has always been, a representation, a physical representation of all of the values that we in this country hold dear. I often tell the story, I come in on the train because I am a congresswoman from New Jersey, and so I come in on the train, and as we're driving to the Capitol from Union Station, I often can't help but be amazed that that's my office. That's where I get to work. And that sense of awe has carried with me up until this day. So with that in mind, you can imagine how hard it was for me to believe, even as I was sitting on the floor of the House, that our beloved Capitol was being attacked by American citizens sent over by the President of the United States because he didn't want to leave office in our democracy. And I remember so vividly crouching in the gallery of the House. That was the last area to be evacuated. We watched the floor be evacuated. I often tell friends now, if you see the Secret Service come and grab the Speaker of the House, that's a good time to leave the floor of the House. But we didn't. We were in the gallery. We were hoping we could certify our elections, as was our constitutional duty. And so as I was there, I was crouched down because we were concerned about active shooters. I was holding my cell phone in one hand to call my family as other members were calling their families because they were afraid they weren't going to make it out of the gallery. And I had a gas mask in the other hand because we were concerned of the rioters if they broke through those barricades. I sat there and I had two things in mind that day. On one side, I had this great sense of sorrow that it had come to this, that our nation was so divided, that people who were misled, as Jason said, veterans on both sides of those doors would come and attack our Capitol. And then the other side of my brain had really a sense of rage. How dare they? How dare they? And yet as I sit here today, as I think about how far we've come with the January 6th hearings, with the people in elections all across this nation who repudiated those who would deny our elections, those who would deny our democracy, I feel a new sense of hope. I'll give you a little bit of the inside scoop on the Capitol. Many of the members hate this green pin. They think it's a ridiculous color. But I got to tell you, as I stand here today, I think it's great. I think it symbolizes new hope. I think it symbolizes a new start to our democracy. And as I stand here with these veterans, as I stand here with these other veteran members of Congress, I can tell you that we are prepared and ready for this new start. We are prepared and ready to make sure that going forward, our democracy is stronger and more resilient than ever. And so it's with almost a sense of joy that I start this new term in Congress, because I know the American people have our back. I know these veterans are never going to forget their oath to the Constitution and are always going to fight to protect and defend our Constitution against enemies, both foreign and domestic. We will keep up that fight, and we know you're all with us. Thank you for coming here today to make sure that we can always remember what we're fighting for and why it's so important. And I'll end like everybody else. God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
I'm especially proud to bring up our next speaker. It's our very first Common Defense member elected to the office of Congress. Congressman Chris DeLuzio is an Iraq War veteran, U.S. Naval Academy grad, go Navy, and has deployed many times during his service. Chris is deeply committed to defending our democracy and freedom to vote. Going back to the oath of office he first took as a 17-year-old at the Naval Academy in Annapolis. As a lawyer, Chris worked to protect voting rights in our elections as a policy director of the Brennan Center for Justice. He was also part of the Pitt Faculty Organizing Committee with the United Steelworkers, fighting successfully for a union. Please welcome Common Defense member and newly elected Congressman Chris DeLuzio.
Some love back there, guys. Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thanks, of course, to Common Defense, Courage for America, and so many fellow veterans for being here and for all your courageous work for our democracy, and for letting me lend my voice today on an important day, I think, to commemorate what happened and to call for something different. It's an honor, of course, to join my future and current colleagues today as well, and fellow veterans, Chrissy Houlihan, Mikey Sherrill, and Jason Crow, who are just great members of the Congress and great veterans who've lent their voice to the important work that we have to do in Washington. I'm here today, like so many others who have served this country of ours, who love this country deeply. Many of us, in all different ways, when we raised our right hand, we took that oath. We said we were willing to risk our lives for this country because we believed, as I still do, that America was worth fighting for. And it is. Every one of these veterans, they wrote a blank check to this country when they set up to serve. At whatever time, in peace or war, that was what they were willing to do, what all of us are willing to do who serve. I learned some basic values in the Navy: hard work, sacrifice, patriotism. Those values drove me and so many others to commit to a life of service. I see, unfortunately, and I think we all know it, forces of extremism on the far right that are ready to tear down our government at whatever cost. And we've seen the consequences of that even in the last couple of days in the chaos around electing a Speaker of the House, blocking us from doing the basic work of the people's business in the House of Representatives. The right-wing insurrectionists, extremists, they act like and pretend as though they own the flag of this country. They do not. They do not own patriotism. It is not patriotic to walk around lying about election results. It's not patriotic to throw out the votes of Americans, my fellow Pennsylvanians. And it's certainly not patriotic to attack cops, law enforcement, to storm our Capitol, to bludgeon people with bats, trying to overthrow our democracy. Yeah, I thought the 9/11 attacks were a low point in American history, and they certainly were. But I never thought I'd see at this seat of government, seat of the people's house, Americans desecrating our flag, storming it, disrupting the functioning of our democracy. The political violence of January 6th simply was unconscionable. But the threat's not going away, and I think we have to be sober and honest about that fact. We have to condemn it. And I still see too many members of the House, in the Senate, who lack the courage or the backbones to condemn exactly that violence and condemn these forces of extremism on the right. And I see some actively adding rhetorical fuel to the fire, continuing to support extremists, those who even participated in the insurrection. Well, I'm here to tell you, as someone who's committed to a life of service, who stands alongside my colleagues and so many other veterans, that this political violence, this extreme rhetoric, it must end. So to honor the sacrifices of so many who have served, of those like Officer Fanone, who were there to protect and beat back the attack on the Capitol, I call on all Americans of whatever political persuasion and party to condemn political violence and work together to prevent it in the future. We have to. The American people do not want these anti-democratic forces to succeed. They want this government to survive, to be strong, and so do I. And I will work with anyone, I don't care your party, to make that happen. It's what we owe the American people, and I hope my colleagues across the aisle and otherwise will join me in condemning violence and recommitting ourselves to this American democracy and our Constitution. The American people deserve nothing less. Thank you so much.
I have the pleasure of introducing a special guest who is with us today. You may have heard of him. His name is Marcus Flowers. He is a proud U.S. Army veteran from Rome, Georgia, and he is going to lead us in a special ceremony. Marcus?
Thank you. Thank you. You know, every member that got up and spoke before me said the same thing. They talked about the oath of office that we took and how that oath of office didn't end when our enlistment or our commissions ended. It was for life. I took that oath at 18 years old. And over the course of a 30-year career as a soldier, a defense contractor, and a government official for the Department of Defense, I reaffirmed that oath many times. As veterans, you know, we continue to honor that oath day in and day out, which is why when I saw the events on January 6th, I resigned my post as a government official because I knew that those members who helped incite the violence of that day dishonored the oath that we take. Today, our CFA Council members and our special guests, representatives that spoke today out will reaffirm an oath now. I will begin. Raise your right hands. I state your name. Do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same. For our reproductive freedom, for climate justice, and for democracy. And that I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. And that I will well and faithfully continue these duties as a veteran and as an American. So help me God. Thank you.
You might have heard that yesterday a letter written by former Capitol Police Officer Fanone was co-signed by more than 1,000 veterans, active duty members, law enforcement, and military families, and was delivered to the de facto Speaker of the House, Marjorie Taylor Greene. And today we are honored to have him speak about why we must continue to condemn political violence and hold those accountable that spread those violent and hate-filled messages. Everyone, Michael Fanone.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Crow, Representative Sherrill, Representative Houlihan, and Representative DeLuzio. Courage for America, Common Defense, and the incredible group of veterans from across the country for being here today. Particularly in light of the absolute chaos that's unfolding in the race for Speaker. But if I could guarantee one thing about the new House majority, it's this. This is just the beginning. This type of chaos will happen every single day in the House. As some of the most extreme politicians our country has ever seen hold our democracy hostage. I should know. Tomorrow marks 2 years since the day I almost died defending the Capitol from people who thought overthrowing the government was a good idea. The events of that day felt like a wake-up call for me and many others that political violence is real. The worst part is that our elected leaders allowed this to happen. And yet this week, people who encouraged and even attended the insurrection are now taking their places as leaders in the new House majority. People like Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who said insurrectionists would have won on January 6th if she had been involved. Or Representative Matt Gaetz, who encouraged voters to arm themselves at the polls. Or newly sworn in, or soon to be sworn in, Representative Derek Van Orden, who breached police barricades with the insurrectionist mob on January 6th. Yesterday, I delivered a letter to Marjorie Taylor Greene, signed by over 1,000 veterans, active duty service members, and military family members, demanding that they condemn political violence in all its forms. We cannot afford to brush political violence under the rug or turn a blind eye when others encourage it. I've spent a lot of time over the last 2 years about thinking what it means to be courageous and how I can best demonstrate courage in this moment. For me, being courageous means speaking out so my 4 daughters can live in a country without fear of political violence from the MAGA movement that is putting their futures at risk. That's why today I'm proud to announce that I'm joining the Council of Courage for America, a new campaign pushing back against the Republican House's extreme MAGA agenda that puts political power over the rights and freedoms of Americans. I refuse to stay silent on a matter that affects us all. I thank you all for speaking out with me. To the new Speaker of the House, whoever the hell that ends up being, and other GOP House leaders, here's my message to you. You have this job because you promised to represent the people. We, the people, are calling on you to condemn political violence. As you take on your new roles, I will be watching and waiting for public statements from each and every one of you to do just that. Enough is enough. Thank you.
Thank you again. We honestly cannot thank him enough. I have the pleasure of inviting my colleague and brother, U.S. Army veteran Naveed Shah, who is our political director of Common Defense.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Naveed Shah. I'm a veteran of the war in Iraq, where I served about 12 years ago. When I was there in January of 2010, Iraq was holding their second ever national elections. For many of them, it was their first time ever casting a ballot. For once on that day, the insurgents were not targeting the Americans who were providing security. Instead, they were targeting their own fellow citizens. More than 100 Iraqis were killed or injured, and all they were trying to do was exercise their fundamental right to vote. In that moment, the sanctity of our rights became clear to me, and I promised never to take it for granted again. And so when I saw what happened here at the Capitol on January 6th of 2021, I was more than just shocked and appalled. I was scared. I was scared for what could happen to our country if we were to allow the big lie to continue to fester, and what they would do if the insurrectionists took power. And we're seeing that play out right now with this speaker fight. We can laugh a bit at how embarrassing it is for Kevin McCarthy and the Republican leadership to be defeated not once, not twice, but 6 times now. This ain't the red wave that they wanted, but it's the red wave that they got. At this point, the votes for speaker have become like the movie Groundhog Day. But it's really not a laughing matter. As we speak, our government is being held hostage by extremists. During the election, MAGA Republicans promised to bring forth a litany of policies and proposals. But now, they can't even get the government started. While they're pulling political stunts, their communities and constituents just like us are the ones who are suffering. Instead of dealing with issues that affect us the most, like climate change, gun violence, or the debt ceiling, they are abdicating their authority and slinging mud. Kevin McCarthy is facing a coup from within his own party right now, but don't be fooled, because Kevin McCarthy is no saint either. He denied the results of the 2020 election. He allows Marjorie Taylor Greene free rein to spout dangerous conspiracy theories. And just last night, he again had the support of former President Donald Trump. And if you think that's bad, alternatives like Jim Jordan and Lauren Boebert are even worse. We know that members of Congress aided and abetted the insurrectionists on January 6th. They called January 6th a normal tourist visit afterward. Ironically, McCarthy and Republican leadership cozied up to the very same MAGA extremists who are now blocking Congress from even being seated. More than 150 election deniers were elected to this Congress. They don't deny that they won, of course. They just only deny that Trump lost because that's politically convenient for them. And make no mistake, many of these election deniers don't just tacitly support violent rhetoric, they are dangerous in real ways. Derek Van Orden is a Navy veteran who was at the Capitol on January 6th, and he breached police barricades by force. We've all seen protesters be thrown in jail for far less, but instead the Republicans have welcomed him into their caucus. It is beyond the pale these MAGA extremists are about to serve in a government that they fundamentally do not believe in. Any oath that they would take would be a lie. That is why Common Defense, with veterans from 18 states representing more than 300,000 members, are gathered here today with our friends from Courage for America, from the Courage for America Council. Political violence like we have seen with shootings targeting communities of color in Buffalo and El Paso happened because leaders allow violent rhetoric to go unchallenged. It starts at the top. Leaders like Kevin McCarthy and Steve Scalise must condemn the most dangerous members of their caucus and the terrorizing rhetoric that they espouse. And that's why I'm joining in today to call on Republican leadership to do the right thing. The future of our democracy really depends on them. Thank you.
You might have heard that we had some successes in 2 battleground states. We have 2 members representing Arizona and Georgia that are going to give remarks. Our first one is a member, Ed Anderson, who is a United States Air Force veteran, and he comes to us from Georgia. Ed?
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name's Ed Anderson. I'm a retired public school educator and Air Force meteorologist from the Vietnam era. I'm old enough to go back to when I was in elementary school, probably 3rd grade or so, and we made a trip to the Capitol. And one of my friends posted that picture on Facebook a couple years back, and I had a chance to look at it. And I thought then, here I was, a young black boy from suburban Philadelphia, sitting here at the cradle of liberty. And at the time, we had the civil rights movement going on, all these other things, and I was in awe. I was in awe at the power that surrounded me. On January 6th, once again, I was in awe. A little bit of shock, too, as I watched the insurrectionists overpower the law enforcement people protecting the Capitol, waving American flags, using back the blue flags to hit and attack the blue. I literally cried that day as I watched the events unfold, and I rededicated myself to wanting to work to strengthen our democracy. Yes, I live in Georgia now, and we do have, I refuse to use her middle name, but Marjorie Trader Greene, who just makes obnoxious, ridiculous, inflammatory statements and never served a minute for anyone other than herself. I stand here today, literally and figuratively, with these other vets as we once again bring the fight for democracy to the steps of our nation's capital. But we're doing it with respect. We're not throwing bottles. We're not spraying bear spray. We're not beating people with flags. We're here to voice our support for those members of Congress who abide by the oath that they have taken. I will go far enough to suggest that some of these folks don't deserve to be in Congress. And I would hope that, unfortunately, we know the House Ethics Committee is not going to come out the way we wished it would, But there are several members that should be brought up on charges of sedition and treason, yet they'll be hopefully standing there with their hand up to take the oath of office. I'm going to close with something. As I said, I'm a meteorologist by training. One of the things I used to do was fly into the center of hurricanes and typhoons. Got religion a couple times doing that. But one of the things that I noticed, and an analogy that I can make, as I looked at the procedures on the House floor, you notice in the Democratic caucus is sitting there, united, all together. That's like the eye of a storm. It's calm in the eye because the rough weather has already come by. It's going to come back. The Republicans are that wall cloud. And wall clouds contain thunderstorms, winds, all the other things that we associate with the negative aspects of tropical storms. The Republicans are in that wall cloud. I don't know how long it's going to last or how deep it's going to be, but it's going to take the courage of those of us who have served our country to make them realize that they will not prevail. I didn't come up here with prepared remarks like everybody else because I kind of tendency to get offhand, but I'll tell you, if you get a chance to get hold of the booklet of the House Republican majority, this contains a lot of good information that we all can use as we interact with our elected officials. I want to thank you guys for providing me the opportunity to speak. I want to thank my fellow veterans. I want to thank Brother Fanone, and God bless America.
And from Arizona, Tucson specifically, Sylvia Gonzalez Anders.
Hello, thank you very much. My name is Sylvia Gonzalez Anders, and I joined the United States Air Force because I wanted to serve my country and pursue the American dream. My parents were immigrants from Mexico, and they instilled strong values in us, such as hard work, a thirst for education, and a belief in fairness and justice for all. After the military, I worked in the Department of Veterans Affairs as a nurse and an echocardiographer. There, I saw my fellow veterans suffering and paying the price for the work that they had done and the sacrifices they had made. Our sacrifice and duty did not end when we took off our uniforms. For many of us, we know it's our responsibility to continue to uphold that oath to defend our country and the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. When I saw the insurrection on the Capitol happening on January 6th, 2021, I was horrified and shocked to my core. I couldn't believe the way that they were desecrating the Capitol, but worse than the physical damage, they were attacking the very foundations of our democracy. Unfortunately, January 6th wasn't a lone event. As a grassroots organizer, I am seeing an increasing level of violence up close. It's a top-down movement from the Republican leadership. That's why I'm here today, because if Representatives McCarthy and Scalise will not condemn the dangerous, violent rhetoric coming from their caucus, then they are essentially endorsing it. As a veteran who honorably served my country, as a military spouse, and as an American citizen, I'm calling on Republican leadership to stop this madness, condemn the violent political rhetoric, and hold accountable those who incite it. Thank you.
Well, good morning. It's always a great day to protect our democracy, isn't it? My name is Jacob Thomas. I am a proud gay Air Force veteran who grew up in the great state of Georgia, just next door to Rome. And I have the honor and privilege, I'll also say briefly, I'm the communications director for Common Defense here. And I have the honor and privilege to be joined by some amazing people. Pete Lucier, a Marine veteran, Victor Bencomo, a Navy veteran, and Stephen Kling, an Army veteran. They're also members of the Courage for America Council. The theme for today and our week of action is not on our watch. For many of us here today, our military service has come to a close, but our oaths to protect this country and defend our Constitution and our democracy never expired. Whether we separated, retired, or medically discharged due to the traumas our bodies had to endure during our service, we were supposed to be allowed to sleep well, knowing that our watch had been taken up and protected by our elected officials, that they would do their job, that they would keep their oaths just as we had. For our Navy veterans here today, there's a poem called The Watch, and it's very familiar testament to their commitment and service and courage and loyalty that all of our service members uphold. And it's a vital and important part of retirement ceremonies for our naval service members. The original poem is a solemn moment to pass on the duty of the watch to those who come after. We wanted to share a modified version today that encompasses the commitment of our veterans and members that have been defending our democracy in these unprecedented times that our nation currently faces. MAGA extremists have taken over the Republican Party, and in his bid for power, leader Kevin McCarthy has capitulated to the most radical members of his own party. McCarthy and other elected officials must show their courage and forcefully call out the violent rhetoric and tactics and the dangerous election denialism of their colleagues, not bolster them in short-sighted attempts to retain their own thirst for power. I believe that it is our duty as veterans who took an oath to defend this country, this great republic, and our democracy against political leaders that are actively undermining the very values and ideals our nation was founded on. Our oaths did not expire, and it is time for our elected officials to honor the oaths that they were supposed to have already taken this week, but have not been able to because of the MAGA extremism happening on the floor of the House currently as we speak. They need to put an end to the dangerous tactics and violent rhetoric before irreparable harm comes to our democracy. It is time for them to take up this watch. Our freedoms depend on it. Our values depend on it. America depends on it. Thank you.
The watch. For many years, we stood the watch. While some of you were in your beds at night, we stood the watch. While some of you were in school, learning your trade, we stood the watch. Yes, even before some of you were born into this world, we stood the watch.
In those years when the storm clouds of war were seen brewing on the horizon of history, we stood the watch. Many times we would cast an eye ashore and see our families standing there, needing our guidance and help, needing that hand to hold during those hard times. But we still stood the watch.
We stood the watch for many years. We stood the watch so that you, your families, and our fellow countrymen could sleep soundly in safety. Each and every night, knowing that we stood the watch, today we are here to say our watch should be relieved. relieved by those we sacrificed for, who were elected to lead. We should be relieved, but that requires you to stand the watch.
Today you've heard from some incredible patriots. We are the people power, and we will continue to show up and show out for democracy. We will not rest. And as we await for a committed sworn-in Congress, know that we are still upholding our oaths, and we expect the same from them. Thank you for being here. Tell every veteran that you know that they have a home at Common Defense, and we all have courage for America. Thank you.